If healing is supposed to make you feel better, why does it sometimes make you feel alone? Why does growth feel quiet? Why does peace feel unfamiliar? Why does becoming healthier create distance? Maybe healing doesn't just remove pain. Maybe it removes the dynamics that once kept you connected. And when the dynamics disappear, so does the familiarity. And familiarity feels like belonging. Before you ever wanted growth, you wanted attachment. Before you ever wanted clarity, you needed connection. Before you ever built an identity, you built survival. As a child, your nervous system learned something simple. Belonging equals safety. If you were accepted, you were protected. If you were rejected, you were exposed. And exposed meant danger. Your body learned this long before your mind did, so you adapted. If your environment was chaotic, you became calm. If your environment was fragile, you became strong. If your environment was emotionally unstable, you became the regulator. If your environment punished confidence, you became smaller. If your environment feared ambition, you softened your dreams. You didn't choose a role. You survived into one. Maybe you became the fixer. The listener, the strong one, the quiet one, the one who never asked for too much. These roles created balance, they created predictability, they created proximity, and proximity created belonging. But proximity was not built only on love, it was built on shared patterns. Shared stress, shared chaos, shared complaining, shared emotional intensity. When you heal, you stop feeding the old pattern, you stop over-explaining. You stop absorbing tension, you stop chasing validation, you stop reacting the way you used to. And suddenly, something feels different. Not dramatic, subtle. Conversations feel shorter. Certain dynamics feel flat. Certain relationships feel distant. And you interpret that shift as loneliness. But it isn't rejection, it's recalibration. You are no longer bonding through dysregulation. And dysregulation was glue. When two people bond through chaos, calm can feel like distance. When two people bond through trauma, integration can feel like separation. When two people bond through emotional intensity, stability can feel cold. Healing reduces activation. Activation feels like connection because it is loud. But loud is not the same as intimate. Intensity is not the same as closeness. And when intensity fades, you may feel like something important disappeared. But what disappeared was shared survival mode. Your nervous system was trained in noise. So peace feels empty at first. Quiet feels foreign. Stillness feels isolating. Because chaos once meant closeness. You weren't just connected to people, you were connected through roles, through predictable emotional exchanges, through patterns that reinforced identity. And when you heal, you disrupt those patterns, you stop playing the role that kept the system comfortable. And when you stop playing your role, the reflection changes. Humans build identity through reflection. We know who we are by how others respond to us. If your environment reflected back, you are the strong one. You are the emotional one. You are the caretaker. You are the stable one. You built identity around that mirror. When you heal, you outgrow the role. And when you outgrow the role, the mirror shifts. And when the mirror shifts, identity feels unstable. That instability feels like loneliness. But it is actually individuation. You are not disconnected, you are differentiating. And differentiation reduces mirroring. Less mirroring feels like less belonging. But belonging built on fusion is not sustainable. Healing doesn't isolate you, it separates you from unconscious patterns. And separation always feels uncomfortable before it feels freeing. This is the part nobody warns you about. Healing is not just transformation, it is separation. And separation at first feels like loss. But sometimes what you are losing is not love. It is the role you had to play to feel safe. If healing creates distance, the real question becomes, who were you protecting by staying the same? Because healing does not just regulate you. It removes the version of you that kept the system comfortable. Every system has balance. Every family, every relationship, every group. There is an invisible structure, roles, expectations, emotional assignments. Maybe you were the peacemaker, maybe you were the emotional sponge, maybe you were the one who carried responsibility too early. Maybe you were the chaotic one so others could feel stable. Every role stabilizes something, even unhealthy ones. When you heal, you stop performing the role. And when you stop performing the role, the system feels it. Not always consciously, but energetically. When you stop overfunctioning, others must step up. When you stop rescuing, others must face consequences. When you stop absorbing tension, and others must feel their own discomfort. Healing shifts emotional labor, and not everyone likes that shift, not because they want to hurt you, but because equilibrium was easier. If your closeness was built on shared suffering, what happens when you stop suffering the same way? If your depth was built on trauma bonding, what happens when you integrate the trauma? If your intimacy was built on mutual dysregulation, what happens when you regulate? You create space. And space feels like distance. Distance feels like loneliness. But loneliness is not always disconnection. Sometimes it is differentiation. Carl Jung called this individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming whole. But becoming whole requires separation from unconscious group identity. Not physical separation, psychological separation. You stop thinking automatically, you stop reacting automatically, you stop blending automatically, you begin to choose, and choice disrupts fusion. Fusion says, we feel the same. We react the same. We stay aligned to stay safe. Differentiation says, I can feel differently and still remain connected, but that shift feels threatening to a nervous system trained in sameness. Because sameness once meant belonging, and belonging once meant survival. So when you change, your body interprets it as risk. It asks silently, if I become different, will I still be included? That question is ancient. It does not come from your intellect, it comes from attachment memory. And until you see that clearly, you will misinterpret growth as betrayal. You will think, maybe I'm being too distant. Maybe I'm being too cold. Maybe I should just adjust. But sometimes adjusting means shrinking. Sometimes understanding means tolerating misalignment. Sometimes keeping the peace means abandoning yourself. Healing forces a confrontation, familiarity or alignment. Comfort or authenticity, fusion or differentiation. The in-between space is uncomfortable. You are no longer who you were in the old pattern, but you are not fully embodied in the new one yet. So you float. Less reactive, less entangled, less intense. And intensity once felt like love. But intensity is not love, it is activation. Activation feels alive because it is loud. But loud is not the same as deep. Healing lowers activation. And when activation drops, relationships built on activation feel thinner, quieter, more neutral. And neutral can feel empty to a nervous system used to spikes. This is why some people relapse into drama. They create conflict to feel connection again. They over-explain to feel seen again. They overgive to feel needed again. Because being needed once equaled belonging. But being needed is not the same as being loved, and being activated is not the same as being connected. You are not lonely because healing failed. You are lonely because you are transitioning from identity built on reaction to identity built on integration. That transition is quiet. And quiet feels like absence before it feels like strength. Healing removes emotional noise, and when noise disappears, you hear silence. Silence can feel empty, but silence is space. And space is where a new kind of connection forms. Not built on shared wounds, not built on chaos, not built on emotional dependency, but built on wholeness. Wholeness does not fuse. Wholeness relates. And relating is slower, calmer, more selective. You are not being isolated, you are being redefined. There is another layer to this. And it is deeper than attachment. It is the shadow. Carl Jung described the shadow as everything in you that had to be suppressed to remain accepted, not evil, not dark in a moral sense, just hidden. Traits you learned were too much. Ambition, authority, confidence, intensity, desire, independence, power. If those traits created discomfort in your environment, you buried them, not consciously, automatically. Because connection mattered more than expression. The child who shines too brightly in a room full of struggle learns to dim the light. The child who speaks too confidently in a system that values humility learns to soften their voice. The child who dreams too big in an environment shaped by limitation learns to shrink imagination. You did not suppress yourself because you were weak. You suppressed yourself because you were intelligent. You read the room, you adapted to survive it, and survival became identity, but healing changes that. Healing brings suppressed traits back to the surface. When you start setting boundaries, you reclaim authority. When you stop over-explaining, you reclaim confidence. When you stop absorbing tension, you reclaim independence. When you stop apologizing for growth, you reclaim ambition. And reclaiming these traits feels destabilizing because they were once dangerous. Not objectively dangerous, relationally dangerous. Maybe confidence triggered envy. Maybe ambition created tension. Maybe independence created distance. Maybe strength created discomfort. So your nervous system made a decision long ago. Better to stay smaller than to risk losing connection. That decision worked when you were dependent, but now it limits you. The shadow resists healing because healing activates the traits you once had to hide. You may hear internal whispers, don't change too much. Don't make people uncomfortable. Stay grounded. Stay humble. Don't outgrow them. Look closely. Sometimes stay humble means stay small. Sometimes don't change means don't differentiate. Sometimes be careful means don't create distance. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is unintegrated strength. But until you integrate it, you will sabotage expansion. You will hesitate before stepping fully into opportunity. You will soften your voice before speaking clearly. You will downplay your progress. You will question your boundaries. Not because you lack discipline, but because stepping into power feels like disobedience. And disobedience once felt like danger. Healing asks you to embody the very traits you once suppressed. To succeed, you must tolerate visibility. To grow, you must tolerate differentiation. To stabilize, you must tolerate being less fused. And all of that can feel lonely, because the version of you that kept everyone comfortable is dissolving. And identity death feels frightening. Not physical death, symbolic death, the death of the role, the death of the survival identity, the death of the mirror you were used to. Jung believed that individuation requires symbolic death. You cannot become whole while clinging to who you had to be. You must release the version of yourself that was built around adaptation. That release can feel like betrayal. But look carefully. You are not betraying people. You are betraying limitation. You are betraying unconscious obedience. You are betraying fear. And fear is not sacred. If healing makes you feel alone, it may be because you are no longer performing, no longer fusing, no longer shrinking, no longer abandoning yourself to maintain harmony. That can feel like distance. But distance from dysfunction is not isolation, it is alignment. The shadow wants familiarity. Healing wants integration. Familiarity feels warm even when it is painful. Integration feels cold at first, even when it is healthy. Because integration removes emotional noise, and emotional noise once felt like closeness. This is why growth feels quiet. This is why peace feels empty. This is why stability feels flat. Your nervous system was trained in intensity, so calm feels foreign. But foreign does not mean wrong. It means new. You are not losing connection, you are losing fusion, and fusion was survival. But survival is not the same as wholeness. Wholeness requires you to tolerate being distinct, to tolerate being misunderstood, to tolerate being ahead emotionally, to tolerate being less mirrored. That tolerance builds internal strength, and internal strength reduces dependency on external reflection. You begin to know who you are without constant confirmation, and that is power. Not loud power, internal power, the kind that does not shrink to preserve proximity, the kind that does not sabotage peace to feel needed. Healing separates you from the role, and the role was never your essence, it was your adaptation. Now you are being asked to choose, adaptation or authenticity, fusion or individuation, familiar intensity or stable alignment. The discomfort you feel is not failure, it is integration in progress. So here is the truth most people never say out loud. Healing will cost you the version of you that kept everyone comfortable. Success will cost you the role that made you predictable. Growth will cost you the identity that once guaranteed belonging. And that cost feels like loneliness before it feels like freedom. Because you are not just improving, you are separating. Separating from unconscious contracts, separating from inherited fear, separating from the need to be mirrored. And separation to a nervous system trained in attachment feels like danger. But it isn't danger. It is differentiation. You are not becoming distant. You are becoming distinct. You are not rejecting people. You are releasing roles, and roles are not love. They are strategies. Strategies built when you needed safety more than authenticity, but you are not that dependent child anymore. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to become unfamiliar. You are allowed to be misunderstood, because maturity is not fusion. It is internal stability. It is the ability to stand in your growth without shrinking, to maintain proximity. Yes, some dynamics will shift. Yes, some connections will feel different. Yes, there may be silence. But silence is not abandonment, it is space. And space is where real alignment forms. The real betrayal is not changing. The real betrayal is staying small when you know you are capable of more. You do not fear success. You do not fear healing. You fear the temporary loneliness that comes with becoming yourself. But that loneliness is not the end. It is the bridge. And on the other side of that bridge is connection built on choice, not survival. Connection built on wholeness, not chaos. Connection built on truth, not fear. So if growth feels quiet, if healing feels isolating, if success feels heavy, don't retreat. You are not losing belonging. You are redefining it. And somewhere deep inside, you already know which version of yourself is ready to rise.